The opening weeks of 2025 saw a return to familiar territory in U.S. foreign policy. President Trump, newly inaugurated for his second term, rattled the international community with aggressive maneuvers. A tense standoff with Colombia, a longtime U.S. ally, ensued. Trump threatened a 25% tariff on Colombian goods. The dispute centered on undocumented Colombian migrants in the U.S. The Trump administration demanded Colombia allow U.S. military planes for repatriation. Colombian President Gustavo Petro saw this as an infringement on sovereignty. Trump threatened economic consequences. The standoff ended with diplomatic negotiations. A compromise was reached, though details remain secret. Colombia agreed to cooperate on migrant repatriation. The Colombia incident brought into sharp focus the challenges posed by undocumented migration to the United States, a long-standing issue that has become increasingly fraught in recent years. The Trump administration has made it clear that stemming the flow of migrants, particularly from Latin America, is a top priority. The administration argues that the United States is being overwhelmed by migrants, seeking to take advantage of its generosity, and that many of these migrants pose a threat to national security. Critics, however, contend that the administration is exaggerating the problem and using fear-mongering tactics to advance a xenophobic agenda. The standoff with Colombia also exposed the Trump administration's willingness to use economic pressure as a tool of foreign policy. The threat of tariffs, a favorite tactic of the president's, sent a clear message to Colombia and other countries in the region: cooperate with us or face the consequences. This approach has drawn criticism from those who argue that it is counterproductive and likely to backfire in the long run. They contend that such heavy-handed tactics will only serve to alienate U.S. allies and drive them into the arms of rivals like China. The Colombia incident was just one manifestation of President Trump's America First 2.0 foreign policy, a more aggressive and confrontational approach to international relations. This approach, which prioritizes American interests above all else, has alarmed many U.S. allies who fear that it will destabilize the global order and lead to a more dangerous and unpredictable world. In Europe, where leaders had hoped that Trump's second term might bring a return to normalcy, there is a growing sense of unease. The tariff threats against Colombia, coupled with Trump's rhetoric on NATO and trade, have revived fears that the United States is no longer a reliable partner. Latin American countries, long accustomed to U.S. influence in the region, are also on edge. They worry that Trump's focus on migration and his willingness to use economic coercion will undermine their economies and destabilize the region. The specter of a resurgent China, eager to fill the void left by a retreating United States, looms large. As the dust settles on the Colombia standoff, it is clear that President Trump's confrontational approach to foreign policy is back with a vengeance. The question now is whether this approach will yield the desired results or ultimately prove counterproductive. The Trump administration argues that its hard-nosed tactics are necessary to protect American interests in an increasingly competitive world. They point to the agreement with Colombia as evidence that their approach is working. Critics, however, counter that Trump's tactics are short-sighted and will ultimately damage U.S. interests in the long run. They argue that by alienating allies and undermining international norms, Trump is creating a more dangerous and unstable world. Only time will tell who is right. But one thing is certain: the world is watching closely, and the stakes are high. The future of the international order may very well hinge on the choices that President Trump makes in the months and years to come. One thing is certain: the world is watching closely, the stakes are high, and the future of the international order may very well hinge on the choices that President Trump makes in the months and years to come.